Hey guys, I'm super excited to show you some May the 4th Star Wars stuff today. So we've got some new content, a couple of new Star Wars tracks, but I don't want to just show you the music on its own. I'm going to basically do a more in-depth kind of tutorial type thing where we're going to score an entire short film using that Star Wars music, but also supplementing it with a few more other Filmstro tracks. And as the basis for this, we're going to use a short film by a guy called Max Jordan, who won an award at the last year's SaberComp. For those of you that are familiar with that, we're going to drop a link in the description for his original film, so you can look at the really excellent job he did by using a composer to do a bespoke soundtrack, which obviously is awesome, and you can check that out. But we've done our very, very best to obviously get as close as possible to the same feeling and stuff using just Filmstro, so we want to unpack that a bit. The video editor I'm using for this, because there's some steps obviously that are going to be post Filmstro if you like, is DaVinci Resolve, but obviously you can use anything that you've got handy for yourselves. Yeah, and there's just a couple of extra things as well. We've got like a little Easter egg for you guys, and also there's like a PDF that we've prepared just to help you guys really harness the power of these two new Star Wars tracks. So there's lots to cover, so let's get straight into it. So here we are on the Filmstro Web App, and the first thing I've done is I've put the edit into the browse page here. I'm going to unmute it as well, and I'm going to just turn Filmstro's main volume down a little bit. So that means every single track I audition now, whilst I'm just exploring for music, looking at different, albums and things, and checking out different scores and stuff, that means I can just hear the video straight away. So let me just give you an example of what that means. So if I click this one here, Alliance, which is the track I'm actually going to end up using, you can hear the music, and you can hear the sound from the video as well. Okay, so normally I'd customize music by hitting this. However, I have actually done this already, of course, so I'm just going to go and find the Alliance track that I was using when I did this the first time around, which is exactly how I want it. I believe it's this one. So let's have a look and see what I've done here. So obviously that mise-en-scène kind of down shot is fantastic. You know, we're immediately in the Star Wars universe. This music also helps set that scene, I think, because it gives us that kind of Rey sort of flavour, which works well with the female. Here's that typical kind of horn stuff. I was just overpowering that a bit just so you could hear the music, but yeah, that's more like it. Now, obviously, this scene is a precursor to something more threatening happening. So she's hiding her child, and then we need to segue now into something more emotional that has more of a in-between. So it's not completely positive, but it's also not completely threatening yet. So you see here what happened there was we used Filmstro then to just segue into this much more kind of conflicted sounding sense of this track, which works well for her. This kind of premonition, these kind of flash, I want to say flashbacks, but these kind of forward flashes she's having here, her premonition. So this bit here where she looks over though to her daughter, this is too full on the music. And what I really want, I've just muted it again, what I really want is I want this sound. That's the sound I want really when there's a transition. So that I can fix in DaVinci. So now you can already see I've done a cut down here, which is still using the Alliance track, but I'm using the end of the Alliance track, which I know is going to work well. So that works much better in terms of her looking over, and then she kind of composes herself. And here I've just done a layer. So I did basically a couple of things. So we have, on the one hand, we have just the natural end of this piece of music, but then we also have, just to kind of reiterate her kind of the sense of her ultimate kind of Jedi sort of skills, etc., we've got this kind of really kind of inimitable kind of typical kind of identity that we want to bring into that. So I've layered those together. Which gives us this lovely moment, and then we go into basically the next scene. Okay, so one scene done. Now we're going to move on to the second scene. So for that one, I used Hitman Action. And really importantly, you have to do, or I had to do, the following. So I basically found where the video needed to be basically moved to or offset, how many frames I had to offset this video so that the video would effectively start way later in the film. It's still the same edit that I've uploaded. It's the entire short film, right? It's like 2 gigs worth of video that's uploaded here into Filmstro. But because I can only use one track at a time in Filmstro, because it's so computationally heavy using all the different stems and doing all this kind of Filmstro magic, I have to work one track at a time. So because I want to start Hitman Action at a very, very precise point in this short film, I have to experiment with the video offset and find the exact place where that happens to be. Now, that means that when I press play, the exact frame that it's going to start at is when we get to this close-up. So let's have a look what that sounds like then. So it's really ambient, which I think is just perfect for this, and it's got this really kind of subtle low stuff going on. So there, what I did was move the power up just as we get that really nice kind of push into her face. Really epic, that moment. And then as they start fighting, I bring the momentum up. And then there's a moment where they kind of disengage briefly. And for that, we need to basically bring the momentum back down and have everything kind of back off. So I'll just do that here again. For that bit. And then I already know that at this part, I'm going to basically back off the music. So at this part, I'm just going to drop everything down. And then from here, I'm going to segue into another track. So let's take a look in DaVinci. So here then we've got the Hitman Action, which, as I say, started beautifully on this shot. Here we have this slow push in, which just works really nicely with this riser. All that low stuff and some of the FX as well. Just brilliant for this bad guy turning up. That really was purposeful. I wanted that first hit to just be really, really nice on this scene change, or frame change, should I say. I love that. So there's that drop off. I think glued it together a little bit more by basically just having another render of the Hitman Action piece for the end, so I could get a nice bit of audio tail and just stuck that on there. And now I've got a kind of, we've had the first kind of volley of attacks. She's kind of gotten the size of this, she's kind of gotten an idea of him, sized him up a bit, and now she's kind of really going for it. And for that, I used a track called Countdown. So that one, we're just going to have a quick look at that one in Filmstro. Yeah, here we go. Now, this one, I just want to say also one musical thing that's important is I've chosen tracks which are all basically the same key signature. BPM is irrelevant, time signature is irrelevant, but the key signature is actually quite important because that kind of gives you an identity, harmonically speaking, or sort of from an, I want to say emotional point of view, but that's not really true. You've got to, there's more involved to make things sound emotionally similar. But yeah, certainly it's fundamental that you have some tracks or most tracks which are going to be the same key signature. Now, when something changes tack in the film, it's totally okay to change key signature as well. So for example, when something is really ramping up, going up a semitone, in other words, taking this from C to D, that would be all right as well, or a whole tone, sorry, in that instance. So it's just something to really bear in mind. So I might, just mention that again later when I do other tracks and just remind you what the key signatures are for these other pieces of music. Anyway, so here's Countdown. Okay, now that I really love. So we basically have this moment where she's looking over to her daughter. He clearly divines what her intentions are because of her gaze. And then he looks over and we get this nice musical moment, which, because of taking the momentum down just in that period of time, it emphasizes his turnaround because we drop out some of the fast-paced stuff. So I'll just do that again here. And we just have this have this breath. However, that was a little bit too much for me, and I actually changed that again. I'm going to show you how I did this. So if we watch the same scene again, but in DaVinci, so it's even less. So there's a even bigger drop. And the way I achieved that was I had this same piece of music playing here, and that that thing, I then tried to find it. That. So I basically went into our stem control feature and I found the sound I didn't like, switched it off, and then when we listen to this again, we have that missing. Just listen to this again. So it's this sound I didn't want. There was still too much movement in that. So basically took the momentum out, but because there was still some movement left, due to some other parts, I wanted to just remove it as well. So I just went in here, got rid of that, and then I ended up with this really nice. But again, because these are holistic changes, global changes made to the entire track, I couldn't just do it here because that would actually remove some cool stuff which I want at other points. So I basically rendered out one of these, exported the first one with this sound in. Then I exported a second version of Countdown. And then in here, I've got two. So I've got my first version here. And then that is just a tiny little bit of the second one. And to get these synchronized is dead easy, of course, because all you have to do is put them one exactly underneath the other. They're completely synchronized because they're both the same renders from the same engine, i.e. Filmstro. And then just curtail this one down, truncate it, and stick it in a gap. So yeah, there you go. So then to continue that fight scene, then let's just show you what we do in terms of making it sound even more composed. Because of being able to use the sliders, there's some lovely moments which we can emphasize. So I'll just fast forward a tiny bit. Even that, so there's a very brief moment of kind of not supremacy for her, but there's something where you're thinking, oh, this could be interesting for her. So she grabs his hand, I think. So we back off the power at that point. And then that, again, really, really nice moment where he nearly kind of comes a cropper, but then he obviously uses the force. And we just bring the momentum away to just die on this frame. But it's very, very brief. And then by the time we get to here, where basically he just flings her back, everything's back in. We just go from here. Nice. So that's quite a momentary bit where we could really emphasize the on-screen action by just kind of, getting much closer to the edit using the sliders and things. And now it gets quite epic. She's sort of sensing now that he's vulnerable, or at least his weapon might be. So we have this wonderful climax. This countdown piece works super well for this. But I want to bring it out now because there's this wonderful moment now where she basically breaks his weapon. So I have to borrow from the end. So this is something where I rendered it, making sure that the ending was exactly what I wanted. So you just go in and change the ending however you want, render the thing out, and then you've got two versions, and then I'll comp them together. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like here. So here she is getting an idea that, or we the viewers are getting an idea that, oh, okay, things are definitely, looking good for her right now. This is now just segueing into the second part of Countdown. Love it. And that is where, again, the Foley and things like that is just so important sometimes to, let the story just have a moment. Sometimes less is more, and you do need music to back off because we don't need to necessarily know how to feel. Sometimes there are moments when it should be obvious from the visuals, and it is the absence of music that also just underlines the potency of a scene. So this is one of those wonderful moments. The saber falls down, and now she has, we are thinking, is this the brink? Is this the turning point? And we have just the generic, rise, which is part of another track I now used, which is called War, but it's only there for very, very briefly. It's kind of like if you look at the timeline here, you can see that there's War here, but then the War comes back in a bit. So it's kind of like a foreshadowing. And the first time she tries this, it's not going to go her way. I'm going to stay in DaVinci just to show you this part, and then I'll show you perhaps how we go on. Now here I've actually worked incredibly non-bespoke. So I actually did something that you guys are probably familiar with. The constraints of working with stock audio are such that you have to cut things to really make them fit and move them around. So I couldn't use the beginning of War, nor did I actually want to. I just used this and I did it as a fade in. So this lovely little, it's a rise anyway, so it totally works as a fade in, but I wanted it to synchronize here where my shink that wanted to kind of coincide exactly with the sound effects from the film where he uses the Force, like that. Then what I've done is I've overlaid another track, which is the Emperor track. Now the Emperor track's quite versatile, and it's got this very lovely inflection where things are really, really slow, and it gives us, it's kind of that Kylo Ren sound. So check this out. So here comes War again. Now the tide really is turning. He's obviously pressed her buttons in the sense that, she's doing this for her daughter, this wonderful moment. She looks over and is reminded of her responsibility as a parent or whatever, and that gives her this extra strength, this push to resist him. Wonderful stuff. Now, without even going into Filmstro, you can probably already guess that this music went from fast and powerful to there. I then changed the slider positions to just really emphasize the fact that that was what we think is the killing blow. At least it's a massive injury to this guy. So have a listen to this one more time. And again, I'm loving all this, but I want to finish when I want to finish. So again, I'm borrowing the end of the track and just gluing it on to this part, but I'm still obviously able to control what I want with Filmstro. Let's have a listen to this. Love it. Again, going back to the previous point about less is more. Now, in the original film, they do this even more abruptly. They completely end the music, which I think is also incredibly effective. I decided to just have it kind of die off a bit because it just helps me kind of bleed into the next track. And then pretty much it's going to be the same again. So we have the very last track, which is now this really sad moment which starts here. Because again, the film is taking the viewer by the hand and really making sure that you get it. She has had her chips. This is really bad news, which is fantastic. The storytelling is so compelling at this point. We have no doubt whatsoever that this is curtains. We saw the Premonition earlier as well, where he was about to execute her. So yeah, here it comes, the Denoument, or whatever they say in France. Now I've kept the same sad track, but I'm just inflecting it to allow for this heroicism from her daughter now, and inflecting it even more. So that's kind of interesting as well. Now, in the composed version, I think there were a couple of cues there because it went from sad to then the cutaway to the daughter. Quite rightly so, and it works really, really well. But I was quite pleased how with Filmstro we can just keep one theme actually and just inflect it from sad, she's dying, to what? There's some kind of power going on over here, to then even heroic. We get some horn here. And then actually the track that we thought was her death actually ends up basically becomes his death, which I think is just, again, quite poignant, and from a musical point of view kind of works. And that is it. So if you want to watch the whole thing, that's following now, but otherwise just skip to the very end. Right, hope that was useful. And again, shout out to Max Jordan. Don't forget to check out his original film. The link is in the description, along with all the other stuff we've got. So there's the link for the lightsaber effects kind of mess around thing. The PDF is down there for download, and you'll find obviously links to the music tracks and stuff. And so yeah, until next time, happy editing.